All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chef Joe McCray, and you can find me on Daytime Tri-Cities every other Friday. I was there last Friday, and I made a nice summer dish that we're making tonight, so it's not very hard for me to remember what I did just over the weekend. But we're going to have a tomato feta salad, and we're also going to have some shrimp. And I just got through boiling the water, and now my shrimp's sitting here steeping in that warm water. We're going to drain it here in a few minutes. But in the meantime, I've been cutting up these tomatoes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to mix all this together. And this is a nice little recipe because all we have to do is pour a lot of these things together. And it's going to be handy. And we're going to use the feta cheese in it, and it's going to be plenty cheesy. It'll also have some black olives. Sliced black olives, and I'm going to use this instead of actually making a dressing. We're going to add some extra virgin olive oil and some of this aged white wine vinegar, and that's going to make us a nice little, give us a little tartness in the dish. And along with that, I'm going to mix up some sauce real quick for our shrimp. So we'll have us a nice summer cold plate when we're finished. So that's on the agenda for tonight. And just to give you a little bit of background, I'm retired from the military. I'm an old retired Army sergeant. And my last tour was in Fort Stewart, Georgia. And I just had a wonderful time down there. And while I was there, I actually worked in television. We had a television channel. And so I worked in I was actually in charge of the TV group and from the public affairs office. And one of the advantages of that was I got to go all around the different communities to things that were going on. And we did a weekly news magazine. It ran about 45 minutes. And I would occasionally anchor those, but I always did stories on them. And that's how I got some TV experience and how I ended up doing Daytime Tri-Cities. A friend of mine named Hugh Conlon, he's a commercial horticulture specialist, and he's now retired from the University of Tennessee. Hugh is a member of a group called the Southern Appalachian Plant Society, or SAPS, if you've ever heard of them. It's a group of people who just love plants, and every year they have a thing called Tomato Fest down in Kingsport at the Farmers Market. And I've been going down there to that Tomato Fest and doing, when I was with UT, I would do canning. I would do some canning demonstrations and have canning information available. And I also would do some other cooking things. And it was a lot of fun. But ever since then, I've been cooking at Tomato Fest. And there's one thing they always want me to make when I go to Tomato Fest, and that's hot tomato grits. Every year, got to have them hot tomato grits. And if you're not a fan of grits, you might change your mind after you try these. So we may have to do those one day up here for cooking, and I'll show you a really good grits dish because you're not going to believe how nice those are. And if you're a fan of shrimp and grits, that's one of those things that you can use as a base to put your shrimp on. It really works out good.
Well, let's do that then.
Well, I've got 3 or 4 things that I've got already lined up in the pipeline. One of the things I'm going to be doing next week is I will be, or the next time I'm on Daytime Tri-Cities, we're actually doing a live remote, and that's going to be my annual tailgating show down there. Now, I've been doing that show for now over 7 years. And every year they have me do a tailgating show. And sometimes I wear blue and gold, and sometimes I wear orange and white, and sometimes I have blue and gold tablecloth and orange white tablecloth and just wear what I want to. But I try to keep both sides of the rivalry going here equally. That's why I have both the Tennessee and the Virginia cherry tomatoes here tonight. We wouldn't want anybody to get upset that I'm being prejudiced or anything. See.
So you're going to continue after the end of the month then?
Yes, ma'am. They pretty much. Yeah. What I'll do. See, Beth's no longer with us. She's
She told us that after the end of the month she didn't know if it was going to continue or not.
Yeah, they pretty much enlisted me, and the big reason for that is because I may have made a mistake when I looked at after I'd gone ahead and retired. My wife said, because I enjoy a cold beer or 3, that she didn't want me sitting around. If I was gonna drink beer, I better get a part-time job of some kind, you know, just to pay for my beer. So I said, well, all right, I can cook. And they had several openings here, so I went ahead and threw my name in the hat. And I mentioned that I had done classes with I used to do cooking classes with a program called the Tennessee Nutrition and Consumer Education Program, where what we did is we worked with SNAP eligible audiences, and we would try to help them run out a month before they ran out of food money or food. And that was one of the things that we did. And I also specialized in cooking for one or two. And I just got through last Monday afternoon. I was down at the senior center in Lynn Garden in Kingsport, and did a class for some ladies down there. And I've always enjoyed those classes, and for me, my forte was those cooking for one or two classes. And I found that a lot of seniors have a tendency to get in a rut in their food. They don't mix up their diet as much as they should, you know. You know, you get on something you like and you just say, well, that's easy to fix. I don't have to worry about it. So, you know, and so that was the other thing that was important.
We don't need enough nutrition.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big things, too, that bothered me was that there were so many of these people who were spending money that they really shouldn't have been spending it on these different on these different nutritional supplements. And there's no reason in the world why unless a doctor prescribes it for you because you have a dietary problem, there's no reason in the world why you need you need any kind of supplement if you eat a decent, balanced diet. And that was the one thing we tried to make clear. And some of these ladies, they'd never heard of anything like a frittata. And I made a couple of different frittatas for them. And that's one that I've got in mind to make up here, because I enjoy a good frittata. And they're easy to make. I've always said it's kind of like a quiche without the crust, which is basically it. And you make it in a frying pan. So, and when I use those butane burners, I would actually cook a frittata without an oven to do the finishing in it, and didn't burn it. So I had a really good time. Now I also did I've also taken some culinary courses back when Virginia Highlands still had their program going. I took some culinary courses with them, and I've done several culinary seminars when I was working at UT. Some of those were mandatory training that we had to go through for this program that I taught cooking and things and nutrition. But
did you cook in the service, or you
no, ma'am. No, ma'am. I was in the engineers. I was an engineer for a long time. As a matter of fact, I took a break in service and went to a civil engineering firm down in Knoxville, Tennessee, and actually helped design the 1982 World's Fair. I was part of the design team, and actually, there's still one little piece of the things that I did still left down there, and I'm tickled to death because every time I go to UT game, we usually walk by that, and I get to see that little park that I helped design. As a matter of fact, I designed it on a napkin at the quarterback lounge in Knoxville. So, me and one of the guys that worked for the architectural firm we were partners with, we sat out there one day having a burger after a long heated morning, and designed this little park while we were eating lunch. So that was fun. That and the system that kept the lakes at the correct water level. I did that one. There was another one on a napkin at Blaufeld's Delicatessen down on Gay Street in Knoxville. I did a lot of good designs on napkins, I tell you what.
You don't have to carry paper with you when you have that.
That's right. So.
Sounds like you might like to eat.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things that I was good friends with when I was in Germany, the second tour I was in Germany, I was the unit property book officer. And that meant every time we went to some place for training like Hohenfels or Grafenwehr in Germany and do these training exercises, I would have to go sign for all the rations for everybody. And so I would go with our mess sergeant. And we go through and pick out some stuff. And so some of those rations and things, I was like, hey, dude, why don't we get some of these? Look here, they've got those gravy packets over there. Let's put these on them gravy packets, let them simmer for about 2 hours, and let's see what we go. Well, we would have stuff cooked up. We'd have stuff. He'd have those things. We'd put this together. We'd just stand there and be scheming on things that we could cook. And we would put this together, and you could smell it. There was no way that the opposing force people didn't know where we were, because you could smell the food cooking from 3/4 of a mile away. So it was really kind of comical. But yeah, I've always had a good time. And I've got to tell you how I got started cooking, and that's the funniest part. Well, before we do that, let me go ahead. I'm gonna try not to turn my back too far away from you. I'm gonna go ahead and strain our shrimp, and boy, it looks good. Alrighty. Now let's get our bowl, and we're going to pop this in the fridge here real quick and let it chill, because we can't have a cold plate with hot shrimp. So I don't know why it didn't work out that way, but it doesn't. All right, now we got our tomatoes cut up in here, so we're going to start and go down the list here. Oh, the next thing I got to do, still got some more chopping to do. We got a red onion here we're going to have to cut up, so I'll tell you how I got started cooking. How many of you ever seen the old Kraft pizza in a box? Have you ever seen those coming? Looks like they come in about the same size.
I have one at home now.
Yeah, and my sister, when my mother started working, I guess the summer I turned 15, my mother started working a regular job, which meant that we had to split the cooking duties. Now my dad, since he had to split the cooking duties with us, found out that Hardee's was a great place to stop. So we always knew when his dad's turn where we were going to get food that night. But both my sisters, absolutely loved those pizzas. Now I particularly thought that the pizzas I thought the box tasted better than the pizza, because whatever they did to those things, it was not good food, okay? So I got to the point where I was like, we got to do something about this, because I just couldn't stand those boxed pizzas. And so finally I said, hey, I'll make a deal with you, because usually whoever had to cook that night also had to clean up. And I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll do all the cooking if you all do the cleanup. And they hated having to do the cooking. And oddly enough, didn't really know that much about cooking. And which back then, you thought, well, the girls usually learn how to cook, but no. So they thought that was a pretty good deal. So by the time I was 15 years old, I was making family meals for the whole family. And that's how I got started cooking.
I have 3
Cardboard
sons,
pizzas.
And I taught them how to do the box pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, now, they add a lot of goodies to it, but they'd rather have that than to go buy one. But they end up with a couple of 3 meats on them.
I taught a cooking class down at Chucky Doak High School one time as part of that program I worked for. And I'd been invited by a couple of the teachers that were down there, and they had this one young man who was in the class. He was really interested in culinary arts, and he wanted to do culinary arts, and he got a lot of flack from a couple of the kids about culinary arts, being a wimpy thing to do, cooking, oh, that's for women, that kind of thing. And so they invited me down to do a cooking class. And I went into class and I started doing I don't remember what I made, but I started doing this class, and this boy and a couple of others, they decided they'd cut up a little bit and stuff. And I said, guys, let me tell you something. I'm an old retired Army sergeant. You don't want me to climb all in your butt, because I will. I'm going to let you know something right now. Y'all are not going to get any of what I'm making. So if you want to sit around and watch, fine. If you don't, get out of my class. But if you're going to stay here and you're going to enjoy what I cook, then you're going to shut up and you're going to listen. And I don't want to hear any more of your noise. So this one kid says, well, I don't have to be here. I said, no, you don't. Get out. So he left. Well, his buddies kind of looked around at each other and they decided, I don't know, that's pretty good food he's making there. So they stuck around. And I let these guys know in no uncertain terms, look, if you depend on somebody else to do your cooking for you, you're foolish. Because one thing about it, if you ever want to be an independent person, one of the things you better do is learn how to cook, learn how to at least make something worth making. Because if you don't, you're going to starve. Either that, you're going to eat fast food till you blow up like a big old whale, and then you really regret it. So they pretty much caught on with it, and this kid decided that's what he wanted to do, and he went to a culinary arts program down in Atlanta after he graduated. So I was tickled to hear that. But I always enjoyed those classes, and especially in situations like that. That was a lot of fun. But I've got my sisters to thank for their cardboard pizzas. That really got me started cooking.
Well, I'm sure he didn't have anything to add on.
Oh, honey, they had them.
That's the problem too. They didn't want to add anything to them. I mean, we had cheese and some sauce. We had that little can of sauce and some cheese. No, they never put anything on them.
They call this, the boys call it the foundation pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bread's there and everything is there. They don't have to go do anything more than fix it.
Well, I tell you what, they're a lot higher quality than they used to be too. I mean, you could get these things for like 39 cents or something back in the day. And they weren't the best. That wasn't the best quality stuff you got with those, because you had to. That was one of those deals. The older model, you know, you actually had to mix the batter and cook up the. And neither one of them had the time or the wherewithal to mess with all that stuff. That was just too many notes, I guess, if I can quote Amadeus. Too many notes for them to worry about. So. I always use the finger guide, and I'm a lefty if you'll notice. I've got a little logo that I use with a left hand with a knife in it, and I call it the left-handed chef. And so I get some comical looks sometimes when they see me using a knife left-handed. What kills them is when I turn around and use it right-handed, and then they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And that comes from being a lefty. That really does. That comes from being a lefty. Because if you're a left-handed person, you know that there's stuff that you're going to have to do right-handed. There's just a bunch of things that you have to do that's right-handed, and that's all there is to it. Whereas right-handed people really don't have to do that. So we're kind of at a disadvantage sometimes here in the world, because we have to, we end up doing a lot of things. We end up doing, us lefties have to do a lot of things like shift gears in the car and things like that. And so, let me get some things here to stir real quick. I'll use this guy. It looks like a likely suspect. Okay, so now we've got our cherry tomatoes in there. Y'all have to excuse my phone. That's probably my wife texting me about what I should bring home tonight. One of the disadvantages of being in a grocery store. By the way, pick up this and this and this. And, the second message, oh yeah, and we need some of this and this. Yeah, okay. And she always sends me a list of things to bring home, but guess who cooks when I get home? You got it. All right, now, let me find, I just happened to think about that. Y'all have to excuse me. There we go. I knew if I looked far enough I'd find one. I didn't happen to think about having a can opener up here, so.
No pull tab on it.
No. And this one is.
Oh, they are terrible. I don't like the hair tabs.
They're very hard.
They're extremely hard. I like the
And I don't think that one's going through it, and it's not. Piece of junk. Let me see if we got something else in here, folks. I may have to run these downstairs real quick. Ah, here we go. Here's a little bit different one. Maybe we can make this one work. Ah, there we go. That's the sound I'm looking for.
I carried a P-38 for about 45 years. My husband was in the Army.
How many of you know what a P-38 is? I was in the Army early enough to still remember C rations, okay? I always had one on my dog tag chain, so, you know, I know what you're talking about. A P-38 is basically a little tiny can opener. It's only about this tall, and it had a fold-out blade, and it had a little notch in it. So you could take, and this looks like some of the cans you used to get in C rations. You just set that notch up there, and you just do this all the way around it. It had that little blade on it, and you just went all the way around it, open it up. That was a P-38, and everybody carried one of those. It was like in Germany, everybody carried a beer opener, so, you know. Let me set this over here real quick and get it draining. Now let's get the other one open. Because we're going to need 2 cans of this. The last thing we'll put in is our feta cheese, so I hope everybody likes that feta cheese. It's going to have a bunch. It will have a bunch.
This recipe makes for a crowd, then, doesn't it?
If you actually follow the full recipe, yes, it makes quite a few servings. So I'm actually making about half of that recipe. Yeah, I'm making the same amount I made on TV, and we pretty much cleaned it up. I think I had about 1 small bowl left when I got through. When I Yeah, when I finished packing, it was, well, actually I gave it to a gentleman from the Umoja Festival for his wife. She loves tomatoes and things like that, and he said, you know, she'd just think that was great. So I wrapped it up for him and gave it to take home to his wife. I hate to leave and take leftovers.
I had a husband who wouldn't eat leftovers.
Really?
And I like leftovers, meatloaf, roast, all kinds of things. So he was not allowed in my kitchen.
Now, here's one thing that I always do, because this calls for 6 tablespoons of olive oil. So I want you to notice that we're going to very carefully measure that 6 tablespoons of olive oil here. And make sure that we get exactly 6, okay? So, now you saw that, didn't you? Okay, that's 6 tablespoons. No, it wasn't 7. That was 6 tablespoons. Now, this calls for a 1/4 cup of white vinegar. Now, you know, 1/4 cup is actually down to about the rim on this thing. So, I know about how much 1/4 cup is. That's pretty easy. This is a really nice vinegar, that Colavita. They also make a champagne vinegar and a champagne white. And it's really nice. It's got kind of a tan color, but it really gives you a brighter flavor. See, right there, 1/4 cup. All right, now that's stirred in. Let's get that stirred in really good. And that gets us started on our salad. That's most of the salad makings here. Now it's time to do some seasoning. So, what do we need here? Well, we're going to start with some kosher salt. So again, we're going to measure this very carefully. Yep, too much. Likewise, a little bit of restaurant ground black pepper. Too much. Okay, that's our salt and pepper. Now we got to have some parsley and some basil. I would normally have fresh basil, but they didn't have any down there, and I didn't want to take an entire plant and leave it sitting up here. So I decided I'd use this real nice. This is that Lighthouse, the Lighthouse seasonings, and they are pretty good for, you know, dried out of the bottle. They're pretty good. So we're going to add some basil in there to give it a little kick, and we're also going to add in some parsley. And that will be our seasonings. And I like these things that don't want to let you in them.
Give it to a little child, they can open it.
Probably. That's what I hate about getting, I get all my medications and things because I'm a retiree as well as have a disability. I get all my medications and things, all my health care comes to the VA. And they send me, I've tried 3 times now to get them to quit sending me those child-proof things because I don't, my grandchildren are in high school. Okay. Let's make it easy. My grandchildren are in high school. Okay, so now those are grandchildren by I have stepchildren. I never had any children of my own with my late wife. So me and Mother Nature had an agreement. You don't give me kids, and I won't cook them well done. Okay, so so anyway, I never had any children. So. My late wife passed away from breast cancer. Spent all that time in the Army with me, and then gets out about 8 months after we got out. She was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer, which is the worst stuff you can get. 16 months later, she was gone. We got to ring in the year 2000, and not long after that, she died. So. And I used to use her for an anti-smoking class that I would do for kids at a summer camp every year. She was a great bad example about smoking because I had a picture of her with her arm in a bandage after she was having a lot of trouble with cancer. It was just basically killing her. And she could not quit smoking. She had a hand that looked like a softball glove. And she would tuck her cigarette in between those big old fat fingers. But she still smoked. She'd be wearing oxygen and still smoke. And that was a great little picture to show these kids, because the tagline that I used for these kids was, what's the best way to stop smoking? Don't start. And man, it was unbelievable how many parents would come to the end of when they came to the end of that camp, talk about, oh, who taught that class and what did they tell them? Because man, the kids come home and say, you don't need to be smoking. They'd be bugging them about smoking, telling their parents you shouldn't be smoking. So they'd always wonder, wow, that was pretty intense. You know, the kid had never been like that when it comes to smoking. But they sure did. They would come home, and it was a pretty nice little presentation. And hopefully, I didn't try to scare them too bad, but hopefully scare them just enough that they know that, hey, this is something this is a person who can't quit even though they're in this kind of condition. They still can't quit smoking. And it's tough. It's tough. She smoked up until they had her on so much morphine she forgot that she needed to smoke. But it took massive doses of morphine before she ever, and that was probably the last 2 weeks before she passed away. That was about it. The rest of the time she smoked. So it was just one of those things. But I used to teach that class, teach that smoking class, and that was always a fun time with these kids. We would do all kinds of interesting things. If you know anything about the food pyramid, we used to do food pyramid relay, and they would have to we'd divide them up into teams, and they'd have to go up and put their food. They would draw a food out of a little box. They'd draw food, and then they'd have to run up there and put it in the correct slot. And if they didn't, they'd have to get some coaching to put it in the correct slot, and then they'd run back, and the next person would take off with their food. So we do nifty things like that at this camp for these kids. And we'd always have some nice, healthy things for them to eat. And folks, I think that's pretty much our salad. What do you think? Does that look pretty good? All right. Okay. Now I'm going to see how our shrimp is doing over here. Let's check and see if it's cool. I've got calibrated fingers, by the way. I think it'll do for the time being. So what we need to do now, before we start passing out some samples here, and I've got our plates and forks and napkins here, we need to mix us up a little bit of sauce for that. So we're going to start with some, let's start first of all with our Food Club chili cocktail sauce. Sorry. So we're going to throw in a little bit of our cocktail sauce there. Good. Now, let's add in a little bit of the chili sauce. And this is a mild chili sauce, so don't worry about it being hot. This is a mild chili sauce. The only heat we're going to get is I'm going to add in just a few drops of the good old sriracha. And I think I need to take a lid off first.
Rough on a knife.
Pardon?
That's rough on a knife.
No.
No?
No, and I tell you what, I've had this knife set now for about 6 years, and I'm just to the point now where I need to send them back to the factory to have them sharpened again. And I use these, I use just about all the knives I have in there. I've got quite a few different styles of knives. And, I've got 2 sizes of the Santoku, and I've got the big kitchen knife, the big vegetable knife, Oriental vegetable knife. I got all of those with that. So that way I've got a knife for every situation that I need one for. All right, let me just dip something in here and see if we got a little, see if it's got any warmth to it. Just kidding. Just kidding.
His eyes will pop out next.
Okay, let me add just a little bit more of this cocktail sauce because y'all might not think that's. Oh, that's good. That's good. We're gonna tone it down just a little bit. That sriracha is pretty hot because it uses those Oriental peppers. Let me tell you what.
It looks like you were putting quite a few drops in there.
I'm gonna buy some of that. Never had it.
I'll tell you what. It's not as hot as I used to. One of my tours was in. We used to call it Fort Lost in the Woods. It's Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and everybody always asked me where that was at. I'd tell them, well, in St. Louis, you get on I-44. And you drive all the way down I-44 toward Oklahoma till you get to the boondocks. And when you get to the boondocks, you're 30 miles from Fort Leonard Wood. And so it was the only place I've ever been in my life where when you left there, you were actually leaving the boondocks because that's where it was. And that's why we called it Fort Lost in the Woods. And there was a little town nearby there where I used to drive through there all the time to go fishing on the Big Piney River. And it was called Devil's Elbow. So every Christmas while I was at Fort Leonard Wood, we used to we'd take our Christmas cards down there and have them postmarked from Devil's Elbow, just for fun. We'd do all of our Christmas mailing from there. So everybody thought that was just comical because here we were lost in the woods at Devil's Elbow. So how about some samples now, folks? Are we about ready?